The Empire had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their warriors were giants. They stood 9 feet tall with scales hard as metal covering their bodies. Their claws could cut through steel. Their teeth could crush bone. When ships appeared in a new star system, every species knew what came next. Surrender or death. Most chose surrender. But they had a strange tradition. Every generation they looked at their newborn cubs and found the weakest ones, the smallest, the ones with soft scales or dull claws. These cubs were marked. A priest would heat a metal circle until it glowed orange, then press it against the cub's chest, right above the heart. The burn left a scar that never faded, a black circle, the mark of ending. Marked cubs could never become warriors. They could never command ships. They could never marry into good families. They were servants, workers, living examples of failure. Parents pretended their marked children did not exist. It was the way. Was born small. He came into the world as the 7th son of High Commander, one of the most powerful males in the entire empire. His 6 older brothers were perfect, strong, tall. Their scales grew in dark as iron, thick and hard, but was different. His scales came in silver and pale. They never hardened properly. His claws stayed soft. He was half the size of his brothers by his first year. When was 3 years old, the marking priest came to his father's house. His mother looked away. His brothers watched with cold eyes. His father showed no emotion at all. The priest heated the metal circle and pressed it to his small chest. The pain was like nothing had ever felt. It burned through his scales, through his skin, deep into his bones. He could smell his own flesh cooking, but did not cry. He did not scream. He looked at his father's face and stayed silent. That was his first and only victory. After the marking, everything changed, was moved out of the family home. He slept in a small room meant for storage. He ate only after everyone else finished. He was not allowed to speak unless spoken to. His father erased his name from all family records. To the world, High Commander had 6 sons, not 7. Years passed, grew but not much. He was still small for us, still silver-scaled, still marked. When he turned 10, he was sent to work on his father's flagship, the Conquest of Silences. It was a warship so large it could hold 10,000 soldiers. Worked in the ammunition storage area deep in the belly of the ship. He counted weapons. He cleaned equipment. He carried heavy boxes from one place to another. The other marked workers became his family. Old, who had been marked 60 years ago, taught him to read. Young, marked for being born blind in one eye, shared his food when was hungry. They were all broken in some way, all forgotten, but together they survived. Now was 15 years old. The Conquest of Silences had just entered a new star system. Saul, the humans called it, their home. Had heard about humans, everyone had. They were a young species, barely spacefaring for 200 years. When the Empire demanded their surrender, the humans had done something strange. They had said no. No species said no. The war lasted 11 months. 11 months was longer than any war in history. The humans had bad ships and weak weapons. They were small and soft, with no scales, no claws, no natural armor. But they would not stop fighting. They hid in asteroid fields and attacked supply ships. They crashed their own vessels into cruisers. They rigged their colonies to explode when soldiers landed. And they smiled. Even when they were dying, they smiled. The officers were disturbed by this, heard them talking in the corridors. What is wrong with these creatures? They asked each other. Why do they smile when they know they have lost? But finally, humanity had broken. They sent a message asking for peace. A human delegation was coming aboard the Conquest of Silences to sign the surrender documents. Was carrying a box of thermal weapons when the humans arrived. He pressed himself against the corridor wall as rules required. Marked workers were supposed to look at the floor when important people passed. They were not supposed to be seen or heard. But looked up. He did not know why. Something pulled at him, a feeling he could not name. The human delegation walked past. There were 5 of them. 4 men in gray uniforms, tall for humans but still shorter than, and 1 woman at the front. She was small, very small, maybe 5 feet tall, barely reaching his chest. She had black hair pulled back tight and skin the color of sand. Her face showed no fear, no worry. She walked like she owned the ship. But that was not what made his breath stop. On her chest, right above her heart, was a black circle, the exact same symbol burned into scales, the mark of ending. She was wearing it on purpose. It was sewn onto her uniform in dark thread. She had chosen to display it. The woman turned her head. Her eyes met. They were dark brown, almost black, and filled with something hard and sharp. Intelligence, danger, knowledge of secrets. She did not look away. Felt the world shift around him. In 15 years, no one had ever looked at him. Not really. He was invisible, a ghost, a nothing. But this human woman looked at him like she could see straight through his scales into his soul. Then she smiled, just a small curve of her lips, and she moved on, following the officers who were leading the delegation to the conference room. Stood frozen for a long time. Who was she? Why did she wear the mark? Humans did not have the marking tradition. They did not burn symbols into their children. So why would this woman choose to wear the sign of shame? He touched the scar on his own chest. It had stopped hurting years ago, but he could always feel it there. A reminder, you are less, you are nothing, you are ended before you began. But the human woman wore it like armor. For the first time in his life, felt something stir inside him. It was small, weak, barely alive, but it was there. Hoping. He needed to find out who she was. Her name was. Learned this by listening. Marked workers were invisible, so people talked freely around them. The officers called her the small translator and laughed about how humans sent such a tiny creature to handle their surrender. They thought she was nobody important. A secretary, a messenger, someone to carry papers and translate documents. But watched her for 3 days, and he knew they were wrong. Moved through the ship like water through rocks. She was always where she needed to be. She spoke perfect, better than some. She asked questions that seemed innocent but made officers uncomfortable, and she watched everything with those dark, sharp eyes. Found excuses to be near her. He delivered supplies to the conference room where surrender talks happened. He cleaned the observation deck where she took her meals alone, staring out at the stars. He was careful. He stayed invisible, but he was always there. On the 4th day, she spoke to him. Was wiping down a table in the observation deck. The room was empty except for who sat by the window with a data tablet in her hands. She had not looked at him when he entered. He thought he was safe. "You are the 7th son," said Imperfect. Her voice was calm. "The marked one. Your father pretends you do not exist." His hand stopped moving. His heart pounded hard against his ribs, against his scar. "You should not speak to me," he said quietly. "It is forbidden for." "I know your laws better than you do." Finally looked up from her tablet. "I know you cannot eat until your brothers have finished. I know you sleep in the storage area because you are not allowed proper quarters. I know that mark means you will be killed if you ever try to leave space." His claws extended without his control. It was a threat display, automatic, useless. He forced them back in. "Why do you wear it?" he asked. "The circle on your chest." Set down her tablet. She stood and walked toward him. Despite being so much smaller, she did not seem small. There was something about her, a weight, a presence. "Because on Earth I was marked too," she said. "Not with fire, with words, with actions, with silence." She stopped an arm's length from him. "I was born in a city called, it sits by the ocean in a country called Korea. My family wanted sons. They got 4 daughters instead. I was the youngest, the smallest, the sickliest. My father called me a burden. When I was 6 years old, they sent me to live with distant relatives who needed a servant more than a child." Said nothing. He understood every word. "I cleaned their house. I cooked their food. I raised their children while they worked. When I got sick, they told me not to bother them. When I did well in school, they said it was a waste because I would only become someone's wife someday. His voice stayed steady. No anger, no pain, just facts. I was invisible, just like you. But you are here now, said, leading a delegation, speaking to generals and commanders. Yes, touched the black circle on her uniform, because I decided that their words were wrong. I worked harder than anyone. I studied longer. I learned 7 languages. I became so useful that they could not ignore me anymore. And I chose to wear this symbol, to remind myself, to remind others. Remind them of what? That the people they throw away are still people. That the children they mark as worthless can become powerful. That small does not mean weak. Felt something crack inside his chest. A wall he had built over 15 years of silence and pain. Why are you telling me this? He whispered. His expression changed. The hardness softened just a little. Because the surrender negotiations are a performance. Your father does not know it, but humanity is not surrendering. Cold fear ran through his blood. What? We have been building ships in the asteroid belt where your sensors cannot reach. We have been making weapons designed to break scales. We have been planning this for 11 months while pretending to lose. Leaned closer. And we have been talking to people like you, marked ones. On every ship, every colony, every world. That is treason, hissed. You are talking about rebellion. I am talking about freedom, stepped back. Do you know how many marked there are in the Empire? Your people have been burning circles into the weak for 12,000 years. There are billions of them. They build your cities. They grow your food. They repair your ships. And they outnumber the unmarked 12 to 1. His mind spun. He had never thought about it. Never considered that there might be others like him spread across the stars. Millions, billions, all carrying the same scar, all living the same invisible life. They would never fight, he said. They are too afraid. We are taught from birth that we are worthless, that we deserve our marks. That is what the unmarked want you to believe. Picked up her tablet again. But beliefs can change. When the fighting starts, every marked will see humans wearing their symbol, fighting beside them, not above them. They will understand that they have a choice, maybe for the first time ever. You could have conquered us, said slowly. You could have won and made us your slaves. Why do this? Because we know what it feels like to be small, walked toward the door. On Earth, we learned that the strongest empires fall when they forget about the people at the bottom. We are not here to rule your empire. We are here to break the system that creates marks like ours. She stopped at the door and looked back at him. The fleet arrives in 3 days. When it does, you will have to make a choice. You can stay invisible and die as your father's forgotten son, or you can stand up and become something new. What if you are lying? Asked. What if this is some human trick? Smiled. It was sad and knowing and ancient somehow, despite her young face. Then you will have lost nothing. You are already marked for death the moment the Empire no longer needs you. At least this way, you die choosing. She left. Stood alone in the observation deck for a long time. Through the window, he could see Earth's sun burning gold against the black void of space. Such a small star, such a small planet, such a small people. And yet here they were, about to shake an empire that had stood for 12,000 years. He touched the mark on his chest. For 15 years it had meant shame, pain, ending. Maybe it was time for it to mean something else. Did not sleep that night. He lay in his corner of the ammunition storage room, surrounded by enough weapons to destroy a small moon. The other marked workers slept around him. Old snored softly in her blanket pile. Young twitched in dreams. They had no idea what was coming. Stared at the ceiling and thought about's words. Part of him said she was lying. Humans were weak. Humans had lost. The Empire had conquered 800 species across 40 star systems. No one escaped. No one fought back. No one won. But another part of him remembered things. The humans had held out for 11 months. No other species had lasted more than 3. Their ships were old and slow. Their weapons were weak. Their numbers were small. And yet every time the Empire said victory was coming, the humans found a new way to survive. They hid in asteroid fields where big ships could not follow. They sent empty ships loaded with explosives into supply lines. They blew up their own colonies rather than let soldiers take them. They fought with rocks and sticks and bare hands when their weapons ran out. And they kept smiling. Had heard the officers talking about that. It scared them more than the fighting. "Why do they smile when they die?" Lieutenant had asked in the corridor. "It is like they know something we do not." Maybe they did know something. Maybe they knew that surrender was never real. Sat up in the darkness. His hand went to the mark on his chest. He could feel the raised scar tissue under his fingers, smooth in the center, rough at the edges where the burn had not healed clean. 12-1. That was what it said. 12 marked for every unmarked one. The Empire had been creating them for 12,000 years. Generation after generation of failures pushed to the bottom, ignored, forgotten, used. Looked around the storage room at the sleeping workers. 40 of them in this room alone. How many on the whole ship? How many across the fleet? How many on every planet and station and colony in space? Billions. And they all carried the same scar. When morning came, made his decision. He found in the observation deck again. She was watching Earth's sun through the window, her face golden in its light. "If you are lying," he said quietly, "I will kill you myself." Did not look surprised. "That is fair." "Tell me what will happen, all of it." She turned to face him. In the sunlight she looked very young, but her eyes were old. "In 2 days our fleet will exit fold space near the asteroid belt. 40 ships, not many compared to the Armada, but they carry weapons your people have never seen. We have been studying your scales for 11 months. We know where they are weak. We know how to break them." "Your weapons will not be enough," said. "We have thousands of ships." "Weapons are only part of it." Reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. It looked like a communication unit but smaller and simpler. "When the fighting starts, a message will broadcast to every ship in the fleet, every station, every colony. It will show humans wearing the mark, fighting, winning, and it will say one thing: you are not alone. You think that will make people rise up, words and symbols. I think people who have been told they are worthless their whole lives are desperate to believe otherwise." Pressed the device into his palm. "But we need help from inside. People who know the ships, who know the weak points, who can open doors when they need to be opened." Looked at the device. It was warm from her hand. "What do you want me to do?" "Your father will try to destroy this ship before letting it be captured. Standard protocol. He will seal the ammunition storage and vent it to space to prevent the weapons from falling into enemy hands." His blood went cold. "The workers, there are 40 workers in storage. They cannot get out if the doors seal." "I know." His voice was steady. "That device can override the emergency locks, but only from inside the storage area. Only someone who is already there can save them. You want me to stay in storage when the attack starts? I want you to make a choice. Your father sees those workers as acceptable losses, the same way he sees you." She held his gaze. "I am asking you to see them differently." Thought of old, who had taught him to read. Young, who shared his food. The dozens of others who had become his family when his real family threw him away. "Where will you be?" he asked. "On the bridge. The surrender signal needs to broadcast to the other ships. If they think this ship has surrendered willingly, some of them might follow. It could save thousands of lives." "The bridge is guarded. My brothers will be there, my father." "I know," smiled her small, dangerous smile. "I am very good at getting into places I should not be." Closed his fingers around the device. It was such a small thing, a piece of plastic and metal no bigger than his thumb, but it felt heavy, like it carried the weight of 40 lives. "I never asked to be part of a revolution," he said. "Neither did I," turned back to the window. "When I was 7 years old, cleaning floors in my relative's house, I did not dream of starting wars. I dreamed of eating a full meal, of sleeping in a real bed, of someone saying my name with kindness." She was quiet for a moment. "But sometimes the universe does not give us the life we dream of. It gives us the life we need to live, and we have to decide what to do with it." An alarm began to wail somewhere deep in the ship. His head snapped toward the sound. Her eyes went wide, then hard. "That is the early warning system, the fleet. They came early." She grabbed his arm. "It is starting. Go to the storage area now." "But the attack will happen whether you are ready or not." She pushed him toward the door. "The marked workers need someone to save them. That someone is you." "What about you?" Was already moving in the opposite direction, toward the bridge access corridor. She looked back over her shoulder one last time. "We have a saying on Earth, in Korea where I was born, even the smallest stone can change the direction of a river. You are that stone, now go." Then she was gone, running toward the heart of the ship. Stood frozen for one heartbeat, two. Then he ran. The conquest of silences shook like a dying animal. Had never felt the ship take damage before. In 12 years of service, he had watched through windows as weapons turned enemy ships into fire and dust. The Empire did not get hit. The Empire did the hitting. But the humans had learned. The first missile struck near the engine section. The second hit the upper decks. The third cracked something important because suddenly the lights flickered and the gravity shifted and had to grab a wall to keep from falling. Voices screamed over the ship's speakers. Lieutenant was yelling about scales. "They are targeting the joints. They know where the joints are. How do they know?" Knew how. Every marked worker who had ever repaired battle damage knew where the armor was thin. They had been whispering those secrets for months, passing tiny data chips to human prisoners who were never as broken as they pretended to be. The revolution had not started today. It had been growing in the shadows for almost a year. Ran through corridors that tilted and shook. Emergency lights flashed red. Soldiers rushed past him without seeing him. He was still invisible, still nothing. That was useful now. The ammunition storage area was 3 levels down. The stairs were packed with soldiers heading up to battle stations, pushed through them. No one stopped a marked worker. No one cared. He reached the storage level just as the blast doors started to close. The doors were massive, thick metal slabs designed to seal the ammunition away from the rest of the ship. Once they closed, they would not open again. Then the air would pump out. Everyone inside would die in seconds. Standard protocol, acceptable losses. Through the narrowing gap could see the workers, 40 with circles burned into their chests. They were standing together in the middle of the room, watching the doors close, watching their death approach. They did not scream. They did not beg. They had been taught their whole lives that they did not matter. Now they believed it. Jammed the human device into the door's control panel. Sparks flew, metal screamed. The doors shuddered and stopped. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the doors began grinding back open. Old was the first to see him. Her ancient eyes went wide with shock. "Young master, what are you doing?" The purge protocol. "I am not your master." Stepped inside and grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the corridor. "I am marked, same as you. We survive together or we die forgotten. I choose survival." The other workers stared at him. They did not move. Now roared, "Move now or die here, choose." Something broke in them, maybe the same thing that had broken in. One by one they began to run, helped the slow ones, carried the weak ones, pulled them through the doors that his little human device was holding open. The last worker had just cleared the doorway when the ship's speakers crackled with a new voice. His voice. Attention all vessels. This is humanity's official response to your surrender terms. Her voice was clear and calm. It reached every corridor, every room, every deck of every ship in the fleet. We decline. Somewhere above, an explosion rocked the ship, but the workers had stopped moving. They were listening. To every marked being hearing this message on this ship and every ship on every station and every world in space, you are not unworthy. You are not lesser. You are not failures. Felt tears burn in his eyes. He had never cried, not when they branded him, not when his father erased his name, not in 15 years of invisible suffering. But words broke something open inside him. You are the foundation your masters built their empire on. You grew their food. You built their cities. You crewed their ships. You raised their children. Without you, they are nothing. And today, that foundation rises. In the corridor, 40 marked workers stood in silence. Their scales were different colors. Their marks were different ages, but they all carried the same scar. Look for the circle, his voice continued. Wherever you see it, you will find friends. Humans wear your symbol now. We stand with you. We fight with you. We fall with you if we must, because we know what it means to be small, to be told you are worthless, to be thrown away. She paused. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. But small does not mean weak, and thrown away does not mean gone. Today, the marked ones remember who they are. Today, we rise. The transmission ended. Looked at the workers around him. Old, young, dozens of others whose names he knew, whose stories he had heard, whose pain he had shared. She is right, he said. They told us this symbol was our ending, but endings can become beginnings. His ancient face was wet with tears. What do? We are not soldiers. We do not know how to fight. You know this ship better than any soldier. Picked up a heavy tool from a nearby rack. It was meant for repairs, but it was solid metal and it was sharp. You know every weak point, every maintenance tunnel, every system that keeps this ship running. He looked at the mark on his chest, then at theirs. They built their empire on our backs. Now we take it apart. The ship shook again, closer this time. The humans were winning. Stepped forward. His blind eye was white and dead, but his good eye burned with something new, something dangerous. I know where the life support controls are, he said. I could shut off air to the officer quarters. I know the engine room, another worker said. I know how to make the reactors unstable. I know the bridge access tunnels, Old said quietly. I have cleaned them for 60 years. I know a way that is not guarded. Felt something swell in his chest. Pride, hope, rage, all the emotions he had buried for 15 years rising up at once. Then we have work to do. He raised his tool. For every mark they burned into us, for every name they erased, for every child they told was worthless, today we show them what the worthless can do. The workers raised their own tools, their own voices, their own fury. And in the belly of the conquest of silences, the smallest stones began to move. The battle for the conquest of silences lasted 6 hours. Later, the Empire would call it a minor problem that was quickly fixed. They would hide the records and punish anyone who spoke of it, but the humans would call it the first rising, and the marked ones would call it simply the day the circle opened. Fought beside workers who had never held weapons in their lives. They used tools meant for fixing machines as weapons of war. They crawled through maintenance tunnels too small for soldiers. They shut off lights in corridors and attacked from darkness. They knew every weak point in the ship because they had spent their lives repairing them. The unmarked soldiers were bigger, stronger, better trained. They should have won easily. But there were so many marked workers, and they were so very angry. By the 3rd hour, High Commander had locked himself on the bridge with his 6 sons. By the 4th hour, had reached the engine room and stopped the self-destruct countdown. By the 5th hour, human soldiers had boarded the ship and joined the fighting. They wore the circle on their armor, every one of them. When Marked saw humans wearing their symbol, fighting beside them instead of above them, something changed. Workers who had been hiding came out to fight. Workers who had been afraid found courage. The revolution spread through the ship like fire through dry grass. In the 6th hour, stood before the bridge doors. Old had led them through the access tunnels. The guards were gone, called away to fight fires and seal breaches. The bridge was the last safe place on the ship. "I can open it," said, working on the door controls. "Give me 1 minute." Nodded, his body ached. He had cuts on his arms and burns on his back. One of his soft claws had broken off completely, but he felt more alive than he ever had. The door slid open. The bridge was large and bright, filled with screens showing the battle outside. Human ships swarmed around the fleet like angry insects. Some ships were burning, others were drifting dead. A few had already surrendered, their crews choosing survival over loyalty. In the center of the bridge stood High Commander. His father was wounded. Blue blood leaked from a gash on his shoulder, but he was still massive, still terrifying. His 6 sons stood behind him, claws extended, ready to die fighting. "You dare," his voice dripped with disgust. "You crawl out of the filth where you belong and think you have won something. You are still marked, boy. You are still nothing." Looked at his father, at the male who had burned shame into his chest when he was 3 years old, at the male who had erased his name, at the male who had taught him that he was worthless. "You are right," said, "I am marked. I will carry this scar until I die, but you are wrong about what it means." He stepped aside, walked onto the bridge behind him. Her gray uniform was torn and bloody. There was a cut on her forehead and ash in her hair, but she moved like a blade, sharp, sure, unstoppable. And behind her came the marked ones. They filled the corridor. They spilled onto the bridge, dozens of them, then hundreds, and humans standing together, all wearing the circle over their hearts. 12,000 years, said Tu. That is how long your empire has been marking its failures and throwing them away. Did you ever count them? Did you ever wonder where they all went? Said nothing. His scales had gone pale. They went everywhere. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room. They built your cities, they crewed your fleets. They fed your warriors and raised your children and kept your empire running. They watched. They listened. They waited. She stopped in front of. She was so small compared to him, a child standing before a giant. And now they are done waiting. Turn 2, your choice, Commander. Blinked, I am not. The marked ones on this ship voted while you were fighting. When you opened those doors, when you refused to let them die forgotten, you earned something your father never could. She smiled. Loyalty. Faced his father one last time. He could kill him. One strike with the broken tool still in his hand. One moment of revenge for 15 years of pain. The marked ones around him would cheer. No one would blame him. But that was not who he wanted to be. We are not killing them, said quietly. Old made a sound of protest. After everything they did. I know, touched his scar. But if this symbol is going to mean something new, it starts now. They lose their ranks, they lose their ships, they lose their empire, but they live. He looked at, is that acceptable? She studied him for a long moment, then she nodded. On Earth, we have a saying, you can judge people by how they treat those who cannot hurt them. She glanced at. You could kill him and no one would stop you, but you choose mercy. That is what makes you different from him. Snarled, you think mercy makes you strong, it makes you weak. You will always be marked. You will always be. Father, his voice was calm, and somehow that calmness was worse than any scream. I was never trying to stop being marked. I was trying to decide what the mark means. Now I know. He turned his back on for the last time. It means I survived you. 3 years later, the Circle Accords were signed in the Great Hall of the High Temple. Representatives from 43 species watched. All of them had once been conquered. All of them were now free. The treaty said that no child would ever be marked again. Worth would be earned through actions, not given by birth. Every voice would have equal weight, large or small. Signed for the former territories. He did not hide his scar. He never hid it anymore. Stood beside him as the crowds cheered. "They want to build statues of you," she said quietly. "How does it feel?" "Strange," touched the circle on his chest. "I spent my whole life being told I was worthless. Now they call me a hero." "Do you feel like a hero?" "No, I feel like someone who made a choice when it mattered." He looked at her. "What about you? What will you do now?" Smiled. It was not the dangerous smile anymore. It was warm and tired and real. "Go home, I think, see again, visit my family." She paused. "They sent me a message last year, an apology. They want to know who I became." "Will you forgive them?" "Maybe someday." She touched her own circle. "Forgiveness is harder than fighting, but I think it matters more." They stood together in silence, watching the crowds below. Humans and dozens of other species all mixed together. Many of them wore circles, some burned into their skin, some sewn onto their clothes, some painted on their armor. The symbol that once meant shame now meant survival, brotherhood, hope. "The smallest stone," said softly, changing the direction of the river, took his hand. Her fingers were tiny against his clawed palm, but her grip was strong. "Welcome to the future, my friend. Let us see what we build." Above them, Earth's sun burned golden through the temple windows. Such a small star, such a small people, but they had reminded the galaxy of an ancient truth. The ones you throw away remember. And sooner or later they rise.